explore unconventional paths to a fulfilling life. Today, we're talking about something deeply personal and powerful. What happens when you've handled a diagnosis that turns your world upside down, and how do you rise from that anyway? Today, our guest is Holly Beck. She is a health and mindset coach who helps women with lupus reduce flares and regain their energy naturally. After 20 years navigating her own health journey through chronic fatigue and lupus, Holly has developed her Health Bridge protocol, empowering women to take control of their health instead of feeling trapped by it. Holly's approach is something you won't find in a doctor's office, but it could change your life. Holly, welcome to Flying Upstream.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, I am so excited to have you because today I'm going to learn a lot. I already know this, and I'm very excited for that. But let's start with you sharing a little bit about your story. Tell us how you got here today.
Definitely. It's kind of a long, drawn out 20 years, but I'll try to keep it to the bullet points. Well, I actually say that there's two starts to the story, but I'll start with the obvious one, which was coming down with mono in my mid 20s. And I had a really bad case of mono. I was out of work for a month and a half. It just really, really knocked me down. I was in bed like, 20 hours a day, just trying to like recover through it. And after that, my once my blood work started showing normal, or I should say normal with quotes, I still wasn't feeling well, but the doctors couldn't pinpoint anything. I wasn't in active mono or anything like that. So they eventually just said, well, we're going to call this chronic fatigue syndrome and it'll probably clear itself up within 2 years. So that's what I was left with. And no, that wasn't helpful, in case anybody was wondering. So from there, I realized early on that I was left to my own devices, but I didn't have any basis of knowledge outside of Western medicine. I wasn't raised with anything other than that. And so I just very slowly started stepping out and looking at alternative ways of healing and, trying acupuncture, trying some energy medicine, all kinds of different things, none of which I could really afford at the time to do regularly enough to have a big enough impact. But it all opened my eyes to alternative ways of looking at health and healing. And I was determined to find something that was going to help me. So eventually I went to herb school, went to a little mom and pop herb school down here in San Diego, and my world was opened up learning about herbs and all the healing benefits there and the energy systems in the body and how it all relates to each other. And so that was like this huge epiphany, and I was taking as many herbs as I possibly could at any given time. I was taught that plant based was a better way of eating, and I followed that for a long time until I finally realized that I still wasn't healing as much as I was taught that I should be. And so, okay, what's next?
That is
And
amazing.
from there, I sort of went towards the mindset stuff. I connected with a women's group of more holistic, spiritually minded ladies, and that helped a lot. And learning more about mindset work, recognizing limiting beliefs, starting to listen to the words that I was saying to myself, and the way I was narrating my experience was a huge epiphany for me. So once I started that, my life started shifting very much. But, there's still more layers. So that was a huge step forward in my health. Beyond that, I've shifted my nutrition again away from plant-based. I have shifted my hydration. I have learned a ton about circadian rhythm and the importance of the sun, which can be a faux pas when you're talking about, oh, I didn't even tell you, I gained a lupus diagnosis in the midst of all of this. So the sun and lupus is like a no-no for a lot of people, but I've found healing in accepting the sun and learning to use the sun more to my benefit rather than my detriment. So, there's all these other layers that you're not going to find in a Western medicine office, because it's just not what they're taught. They're taught to deal with symptoms, but we need to deal with things on a deeper root cause, and basically getting into the energetics and the mindset and then making the other shifts. That's when those things can start making an impact. And so, yeah, 20 years ago forward to today, there's a lot of other things I didn't mention that has gone on in there, but that's kind of the gist of it.
Nice, very nice. And I love everything that you shared. I love how you shared it. It's so beautiful because, the idea for a lot of people to not necessarily like, it's not that they may not follow what their doctor's suggesting, but to even look outside of that, like to even consider, like, there's something that I can do. There's other things that maybe I should pursue. Maybe I should look into something else. That concept in itself, I feel like, is a little bit foreign to a lot of us in Western culture. So I love that your story kind of starts there, where it's like you take control. You are like, okay, yes, I have all these amazing doctors with all these great qualifications and experience, but what can I do? Because it's still what they're telling me is still not making me feel how I want to feel, or how I feel that I should feel right now, given the situation. And I kind of want to. I have like 5 questions from everything you said, but I want to start with this. One of them is the definition of chronic illness and lupus. The definition, because personally, I hear the word, lupus a lot, mostly because of the work that I do during the day. But also chronic illnesses. What are those two things? How are they defined? How did it feel to have mono for so long too?
Well, mono sucked. So did the chronic fatigue afterwards. If I have flares now, it's usually just bouts of chronic fatigue, but they're much fewer and far between at this point, and I have such a different mindset around it if it happens that I can manage it much differently. But there's like the standard definition of autoimmune disease. So lupus is an autoimmune condition. I would say chronic health conditions and autoimmune go hand in hand, right? It kind of depends on what it is, but the standard definition of an autoimmune condition would be that the simple version is that your body is attacking itself. It no longer recognizes the self as a friend. It's now recognizing certain aspects as a foe. And so it thinks it's doing the right thing by battling something, but in fact it's battling its own self and causing pain and inflammation and involvement with organs and that sort of thing. And it can look different for everybody. So lupus is a really hard one to diagnose. It can often take 6 or 7 years to get a diagnosis of lupus because it looks so different in everyone, and it can mimic so many symptoms of other things that it's really hard to tie down. And oftentimes you can basically have lupus without it actually presenting yet on your blood work. So when I was working with a rheumatologist several years ago, an amazing holistic or oriented rheumatologist, we were doing autoimmune blood work, and it showed up that I was positive for autoimmune, but it didn't specifically, it hadn't figured out which one it wanted to be yet. So it still took a few years before it finally presented as lupus. So I say that's more of the standard definition. And lupus, within lupus, there are multiple different types. Discoid lupus is the type that I was finally diagnosed with, which presents more externally on the skin. So I've got actually a bald spot on the top of my head from that. It can present on the face, all over, rashes and stuff, and it's funky. It's really funky all over the skin. There is SLE lupus, which is more internal and organ involvement, and then pretty much with all of it, there's lots of pain and inflammation to regulate. So not a fun thing. This is something that can lead to death with many, so this isn't something to mess around with or something to ignore. Like, we have to focus on what can we do to support ourselves, right? But that being said, that's more of the Western take on lupus and autoimmune. The way I have come to understand autoimmune conditions is that it is an incoherence in the body, right? So if you're playing that game of telephone when you're kids and you have the whole circle lined up, right? And the first person starts with one message and you whisper it to the next person and they whisper it to the next person. And by the time it gets all the way around, it's a completely different message, right? I don't know if you've ever played that,
Yes,
but
yes,
that's kind of
yes.
how I see it, right? It's like something's triggered in the body. It's getting one message. It's not getting relayed correctly in the body, and so there's this incoherence and dysregulation. And so the way I like to look at healing autoimmune is what can I do to support more coherence in the body? What can I do to support more communication within my body? Right? And that's a whole different way of looking at it than just how are we going to treat these symptoms? How are we going to trick the immune system by giving it steroids or immunosuppressants so that you feel better, but we're not really addressing it's not creating more coherence in the body by doing those things. It's just helping you feel better in the
That's
moment.
that's amazing. Is that the part where you deal with, it sounds like the root cause versus just dealing with the symptoms, like managing, like you just mentioned. Um, and kind of a follow-up to that is also, what does like our ancestral history, if anything, have to do with all this? How does that all play a part into this?
Sure. I mean, that's definitely going to be individual per person and per ancestral line, right? But it is proven that we carry seven generations of ancestry within our DNA, which is wild to think about, So it's not just that we hear stories of our ancestry, like I came from this area and they went through that over there and there was this battle or whatever, or my great grandmother was dealing with this. It's like, no, that's actually ingrained into our DNA. So even though we're living in 2025, we still might have things from way, 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 way back that we're not even realizing is patterned into our behaviors or into our way of thinking. And so that's where we talk about, you know, if we're looking at if we're willing to go deep and look at root causes of things, root traumas, all these things can add up and be triggered by maybe an environmental toxin too, so like I might be genetically predisposed to having autoimmune conditions and maybe that runs in my family line, but being genetically predisposed genetically, if I can get that out of my mouth, doesn't mean that it's going to necessarily come out, right? It still needs a trigger. So we're looking at both our genetics and our patterns, like our energetic and emotional patterns that have been handed down, that maybe we've learned from our mother, who learned from her mother, who learned from her father, and so on. We take all that on, and then what we're also looking at current day triggers, like viral triggers for lupus is a huge one. So mono was that, or Epstein-Barr is that trigger for me, or at least I should say one of them, because I told you there was two starts to the story. The other one was more of an emotional beginning leading up to that from a very negative and tumultuous relationship that I knew even at the time before I was into all this stuff that was part of the story and part of the trigger.
Yeah, that's so amazing because similar experience to the knowing is like sometimes I knew energetically and I knew in ways that at the time I could not put into words, like the effects of certain relationships and certain people in my life. And this brings me to, because I think that in your Health Bridge protocol that you've put together, it sounds like what you do to help people is sort of focus on the mindset work, which sort of kind of brings all of this into it. Can you talk a little bit about the Health Bridge protocol and how you help women within that program, and how someone could reach you if they wanted to work with you with regards to that program? Because it sounds amazing.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. For me, everything started shifting, like I said, when I started recognizing the factors that mindset played in my experience of lupus and autoimmune and chronic fatigue. So I see it as like the you need to create a mindset of healing in order to heal.
Yeah.
And when you're first getting diagnosed with something, it's real easy to be stuck in the victim mindset. And I say that with no judgment whatsoever because I was stuck in that for freaking years, right? Like, we don't know until we know. We don't know until the light bulb gets turned on. So, so no judgment on anybody that might be stuck in that space. But victim mindset is like, why is this happening to me? What's wrong with my body? Why can't it just work? Why does my body hate me? And it feels like that. It feels like your body's hates you. You've been told that your body is attacking itself, and that you're constantly having to battle it. Sure, I understand victim mindset. I get it. I've been there. But we can't, uh, we can't remedy something with the same medicine that's like attacking. We have to find like the balm that's going to help heal it. So learning to recognize the limiting beliefs, such as this is a chronic condition and I'm going to deal with this forever. That sounds very factual. I used to think I was just very realistic. Like, I'm not being negative, I'm being realistic. Until I realized that those realistic thoughts were holding me in that space and not allowing for the possibility of healing. Does that make sense?
It does. It
Yeah.
does. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So we start with mindset. We start with learning to recognize those limiting patterns and limiting beliefs and the limiting self-talk, the negative self-talk, and starting to make subtle shifts there first. And we just start very simply with just some very basic lifestyle shifts, because if we don't start simply, like, it's too much, it's overwhelming, and we're already overwhelmed if we have an autoimmune condition. So we're talking about a little bit of gratitude in the morning. We're talking about getting up and hydrating first thing. We're talking about taking fresh air breaks throughout the day. Like, some very basic things that most of us get too distracted to do. We don't even recognize we're not doing it. So we start out there and we go through a journey there. And then once the mindset stuff is more established, then we can start implementing more on nutrition. Then we can start with hydration. Then we can start with circadian rhythm and shifting your sleep and wake cycles and things like that. So yeah, it's a nice, I think it's a nice simplified process. And I'm working on putting together actually my first group. I've just been working one-on-one, but I think community is so important in healing and connecting with others on this journey. So yeah, I'm looking for my first group of ladies that want to do this as a community.
I
So
love that.
Instagram is where I hang out the most. So anybody can message me there. I am Holly Beck on Instagram.
Wonderful. I love that. And we will, for listeners and viewers, we will include that in the show notes and in the description for anyone to reach out to Holly to be a part of this first group. I do believe, in the importance of community. That's part of why we have Kristen and I, we have this podcast is I really do believe that there's so much healing that happens in community and in so many different ways. Not only in just learning from each other, but also in that energetic support that happens when we're all there and have experienced a lot of the same things and can just, even sometimes without words, because sometimes it's hard to get words out, but can just be that space that holds love and support for each other. So I love to hear that. And I have a question because obviously this is what you do for work. And I also know that you do some other pretty cool stuff. So despite, despite your diagnosis, despite your condition, you've now built a business on top of it. So, despite how these symptoms may affect you, I'd love to, in honor of this month, we've been honoring entrepreneurs and businesses on the podcast. And in honor of that, I'd love to kind of understand how you have built this amazing program, the Health Bridge Protocol, and this amazing business while having a condition that affects your life in so many ways. Can you share a little bit about that?
Sure. And first off, I'll be the first to admit I don't got it all figured out. But it's a learning process, and I'm learning to do better at that every day. Um, I actually have a friend who is also a lupus warrior, and she has a brand called Chronically Planned, and she actually helps women with chronic illness build their businesses in a way that they can flow with and through their flares. So I'll just give her a little shout out. She's called Chronically Planned. I'm going to be working with her actually to learn to do better at this. But yeah, it's been an up and down journey in figuring out how to build my passions while still needing to work, while still needing to take care of myself. And sometimes I do better at it than others, but for me, learning to streamline things, which again is it's still in process, but learning to streamline and learning to plan ahead is a big key factor there. And taking breaks throughout the day, like that is the biggest thing, because and putting boundaries, because I know, for example, that with, I get home, I still do have a part-time job, and I get home and I have all these things in my brain that I still want to do for my work. But I know that when I do that too late at night, past dinner, and I push, my brain is on with all business stuff before bed, I don't sleep well. And when I don't sleep well, then it can trigger more fatigue or, any other symptom, and put me further behind rather than helping me get ahead. So it's still something that I am challenged with in keeping those boundaries, but I think the boundaries is like honestly one of the biggest things. Yeah, boundaries is the biggest thing, and just being clear about your passion. Because for me, I am multi passionate. I have so many things that I try to do and pursue. I think being clear on what's the most important, yeah, I see that you can relate to that.
Oh, yeah.
I think being clear on your passions is, and prioritizing, I guess, your passions is the biggest thing, especially if you're pursuing it as a business. If you're just doing hobbies, more power to you, and you have more flexibility in that. But if it is as an entrepreneur, then getting very clear so you can be more focused is a priority. And that's honestly one of the motivations for doing this work for me and working with other women with lupus, is that I know that many women with chronic illnesses are these multi-passionate people, and their passions are important to them. They want to pursue their side hustles. They want to be the best mom they can, or they want to, traveling is their passion. And I want to help them learn how to minimize the autoimmune symptoms so that they can have the energy and have the time to pursue those passions.
I love that because instead of taking something that could make you go into victim mentality, which again, like we began the episode, would be completely understandable. What you're doing is not only did you empower yourself, you're like, I'm not going to sit down and pretend that I don't want to do all these other things. I'm just going to figure out now how I'm going to do them. Now you're like, I'm going to empower other women to do the same. And if that does not speak to community and passion, I don't know what does. That is so beautiful. And I'm so appreciative of people like you because I am a completely healthy, thankfully for now, woman in her, oh my goodness, late 30s soon.
I
um,
got 10 years on you, girl, so it's all good.
well, you look great though. You look amazing.
Thank you.
So, but with that being said, is even though I'm a completely healthy, woman and I am multi-passionate, I want to do so many things and time is not enough. But I could tell you that, the like 3, 4 days a year that I get a cold, I am no good for any, I am just shut down. I am like, there is nothing that's going to happen. Everything needs to stop. Life needs to stop. But to hear that women, with an autoimmune condition and, a chronic illness can get up like you have and make it happen. Figure out what works, figure out what doesn't. Put yourself through school, herbal school to learn, then continue to learn about, Eastern medicine and about nutrition to then get up every day and help other women. I want to say thank you, honestly, because I think it takes a lot. And I say thank because I don't know, but it also empowers me to be how do I stop? Like what reason do I have to stop when someone who has a good reason and has on a day-to-day basis symptoms that could sit them down and none of us would be able, I mean, not that we can judge anyone anyway, but none of us would judge them, um, continue to do it, then why wouldn't I? So thank you so much for that. I really am appreciative of that.
Yes. Well, and I want to clarify too that women with chronic illness are used to just trying to mask the symptoms, ignore the symptoms, and push through. Especially if they're, say, in a regular job, right? And they have to get to work, they have to pay the bills, that sort of thing. They're really good at masking because it's really hard to get somebody at work to understand what they're going through. And so it's just easier to hide how much in pain they are or how exhausted they are. And then they just crumple when they get home. So, following your passions, becoming an entrepreneur, it's not about the hustle culture. It's not about go, 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 I'm pushing through. It's about how can I do this in a way that it nourishes me instead of exhausts me. Yeah, and like I said, this is still a work in progress over here. I'm still learning. There, like we were talking about before we started on this, that there are so many layers of healing. Like it's wild, but each one has a purpose, and it's just one foot in front of the other every day. What can I do 1% better today? How can I take care of myself 1% better today? It's not about shaming ourselves when we, mess up our routine for a day or two or three. It's about, okay, tomorrow I can do a little bit better. So what's that one choice? Can I make a better food choice? Can I go to bed a half an hour earlier? It's those little things that make the biggest difference, I think, in all of this.
I love that. That really sounds like sort of what you do with your health bridge protocol, which is putting people in like the leadership seat of their own health.
Yeah.
That's so beautiful. Thank you so much. And I would ask, as we're getting ready to wrap up here, this amazing conversation, what is one piece of advice that you would have with someone who may have a chronic illness and is thinking about hasn't fully decided that maybe they do want to start, turning either their hobby into a business, that they may want to become an entrepreneur, what is the piece of advice that you would give to that person to keep them moving forward?
I guess just what, really focus on what lights you up and what has maybe a deeper purpose for you, because that's going to give you the drive to figure out how to continue pursuing even in the tough days. Um, and and if you can start out better than me by structuring a little bit better, like none of this comes naturally to me at all. And I'm also learning on top of all of this in the last few weeks that I actually might be diagnosable ADHD. I don't know, but I definitely am learning that I have some of those patterns, and which is empowering me to learn how to work with that instead of letting it hinder me in the future. But yeah, I would say just learning how to structure things in a way that feels more natural to you, versus like freaking out about all the little details. Like, let's focus first on what your passion is, create the vision, and then what are small steps that we can take towards that instead of feeling like you need to do it all right now. Because that's always what I've done to myself. Like, no, I need to do it all now. And then I stress myself out, which can trigger a flare, right? So don't feel bad about baby steps. There's no timeline here. And get help. Don't try to do it all on your own. Seek help. Seek a coach. Seek a great find a good YouTube channel. Some good books. Just seek out other people and emulate what they're doing.
I love that. Thank you so, so much. And I really do hope that anybody who's listening and has a chronic illness, whether it's lupus or any other chronic illness, that you do reach out to Holly. Her information is going to be in the show notes and in the description. And inquire about the Health Bridge protocol that she's built. And definitely follow her on Instagram. We will link that in the show notes as well. Holly, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. And thank you for being basically a cornerstone of what empowerment really looks like.
Oh, thank you. I'm so honored. One last thing is I forgot to tell everybody, I do also have a podcast where we talk all things health and mindset. And I always gear everything a little bit towards autoimmune. So, but there's something in it for everybody. So even if you're like, I'm not autoimmune, I'm healthy, but I just want to learn about different approaches to life. I've had some of the most amazing people already on the podcast, and we're over 100 episodes now. So really going strong, and I highly recommend everybody check that out too. It's called the Health Bridge Podcast.
The Health Bridge podcast. We will link that as well. I absolutely love that. Thank you for sharing that. And to our listeners, definitely, remember that if you're feeling like the system has failed you or that you're stuck with no options, remember that you get to become the leader of your own experience, and you don't have to do it alone, like Holly said. So, as always, keep questioning, keep exploring, and of course, keep flying upstream. Until next time.